Okay, this is where you're going to break down your object into simple shapes and you are going to start to build with solid blocks of clay. So I have broken down my bird by studying the shape of the body and studying the shape of the head. And so these two simple shapes can be constructed and then scored and slipped together to begin to build the shape of the bird. So if it helps you to draw on top of your sketch to figure out what those shapes are, then I suggest doing that before you start to construct in clay. You also want to check for proportion, so measuring the shape and size of the head compared to the body. So my body's about 1.5 to 2 heads in length. So I actually want to remove some clay because what I have right now is a little bit too big. I can also check the width of the body by using the head measurement. You can roll your clay around on the table to shape and round things out. But you really want to spend time trying to perfect this shape and get it to match whatever object you're sculpting. You may have an object that includes slab elements or coil elements, which you would be adding to build. Mine does not require either of those, so it depends on what you're making. And you want to look at your object from every single side, so you don't just want to work on it from one side. You want to make sure it's even on all sides. I like to smooth as I work. It helps me see the shape better. I can look at the angle and the curves of things to make sure they're matching my picture. I can do subtractive work by actually scraping and carving and thinning out areas, or like you've seen, using my wire cutters to cut off excess clay. Applying some pressure to narrow out the neck of the form. And once I'm happy with that, I can score it and slip and blend and attach my two shapes while they're solid clay. I am not worried about the fact that they are solid clay. Hollowing out is another step in this process. So I'm just going to roll a coil, like a blended seam that you would use on a slab project, and add that around my attachment, kind of blend it in. This will help me with shaping as well. And blending that coil up into the head and down into the body of the piece. So right now I'm working on the curve where the head meets the body. It's softer in the actual photo and it's a little bit more harsh in my sculpture. So I'm just going to add clay to soften that curve that occurs, or the swoop from the head into the body. So you want to study all of these little shapes and angles that you see, not just in the shape of the bird, but also in the negative space, to help you get more realistic or accurate interpretation of what it is you're trying to sculpt. So that's called additive sculpting, where you're taking little bits and kind of building up the form. And then subtractive sculpting is when you are physically removing from the piece. So now I'm looking at that little dip that occurs underneath the head where it meets like the chest of the bird. And I notice in the picture it is actually a little bit more pronounced than what I have in my sculpture. So I'm coming in and changing the shape of that. And now I'm looking at how far that chest protrudes out. And I know I'm probably going to add some clay to build that out a little bit. If you feel overwhelmed about where to start kind of refining, I usually start at the top and work my way down, or just picking the area that is bothering you the most and kind of starting there and then working around the form. And so when I'm doing larger additions like this flat piece, I do like to score and slip that. Little tiny clay pieces that I'm pushing into the piece, I don't score and slip, but something larger like this I usually do, just so it doesn't pop off in the kiln. And if I add it on and it's too much, I can always remove it. And look at it from all angles, because most likely you'll find an angle where it's a little bit uneven or it looks a little bit funky. You've got to make some adjustments. Sometimes it helps to draw directly onto your sculpture. So I'm trying to now get the appropriate curve of the back of the bird. And we can see that I have quite a bit I need to remove. He's a little bit heavy on the back. And so I can just take my loop tool and carve out large chunks, kind of following the line that I drew with my pin tool. But you've got to do this on both sides, so that's where it gets a little bit tricky. Trying to measure that and get that even. But because this is a solid block of clay, and I can continue to add or remove as much as I want until I get the shape perfect. This is why we do not hollow this out when we start. It needs to be solid clay. So I can do some smoothing now, kind of clean it up and take a good look at it again, compare it to my photo. But this will give us a pretty decent start to having a realistic form. And this is step 1 in the sculpting process for working with hollowed form.